Hey guys, so just doing another talent video for Feral in the War Within. I said I wouldn't do any more videos until I had alpha, but even if they change things, these ones are easy enough to record, and a lot of people seem to like the last one, so I'm going to do this by sort of hero tree and each section. So starting with Wildstalker, top section, these are all kind of mandatory. There's no RF now, so you always take Tear Open Wounds. That leaves us with 1 point, and Double Claw Rake is the obvious option because more rakes, more chance to proc vines. There's also this rake node with synergy, and as I mentioned in the last video, these three nodes aren't very appealing for Wildstalker, and this is kind of just bad in general, but leans Druid to the claw anyway. So top section, quite cookie cutter here. Obviously with the old tree, we could have done, die fixation for more single target, don't have that now. Double claw rake, more AoE. You could also drop Tear Open Wounds, get both of them, and do an RF build. So bit of choice lost in there, but let's move on to Druid of the Claw. So top section, same thing, you have 1 point left. Double Claw Rake, good, obviously. The other option is Merciless Claws because you have all these swipe talents, which synergize with it. It has been good in the past. It will be better now with Predator, you would think, although, it's hard to say because Double Claw Rake equally could be better because less energy, so extra rakes are more valuable. So can't say for sure, but most likely it's one of these two options. Also, Tireless Energy, there's a small chance. I have heard that Apex does consume Ravage, so I don't think you actually have to weave bites in that much, but I can't comment too much because I haven't played it. But if you do have to weave in Ravages with combo points and energy, then Tireless Energy could be quite good. And even just, with energy being more valuable now, it's going to go up in value, moving between packs and stuff. That extra bit of energy, max energy, it's going to add up. But otherwise, it's probably one of these two. And the thing in Double Claw Rake's favor right now is, as I mentioned in the last video, Taste of Blood is really good with this tree, probably mandatory in all content, and you need Infected Wounds to get there. And because you're taking Infected Wounds, that kind of leans you towards Double Claw Rake. And because you have both of these, then it kind of leans you towards Sudden Ambush here. Now, you don't need Infected Wounds to take Sudden Ambush, like on live right now, you don't need that, but it does incentivize it if you do have it. Obviously this has some synergy with Merciless Claws as well, but not the same synergy it has with Rake. So filling out the rest of the tree, just kind of pathing down here, and then middle section looks very mandatory. Druid of the Claw has this capstone which synergizes with Berserk, so after that, that's your 20 points. So Druid of the Claw middle section, super cookie cutter, you don't even have a single point to spare, it seems. Wildstalker, a bit more interesting, even though the top here is more cookie cutter, you do have a bit more choice in the middle section, at least on paper anyway. Obviously we have to see how tuning plays out, things like that. But anyway, you get back to 19 points, a few options. So Lunar Inspiration, this can kind of supplement what Dire Fixation did, more single target focus, but this time you can do a bit of cleave value with it as well. It has a lot of synergy with various talents down here. Also with less energy now, this gains value because it only costs 30 energy. So where you'd otherwise be using Shred as filler at times in AoE or even in single target, you'd be shredding less because you have another build, you have this, and you save 10 energy, right? So that's going to be very valuable. Also, they did buff the duration from, I think it was 16 to 18 seconds, which doesn't really do much for single target. Like, it's easy to keep it up, but it does add a little bit of cleave value just because if you're multi-dotting, the extra length is a bit more valuable there. So next option, Savage Fury, which I talked about in the last video, definitely leans Wildstalker. So Haste, it's good for dots. Also synergy with this, Strategic Infusion, 6 seconds, 6 seconds. Maybe the energy recovery part is a little bit more favored for Druid of the Claw, like getting more bites out, but otherwise this is definitely a Wildstalker talent. The other option, definitely Taste for Blood, I think is still going to be optional because even though you don't have Ravage, you still have things like Apex, you still have things like Convoke. And I talked about how much stronger this is in terms of numbers in my last video, but what I didn't really mention there is we do have less energy now. So even though this gives a lot more bite damage, we're not casting as many bites. But for things that are independent of energy, namely Apex and Convoke, this is quite a big boost for them. In fact, for Convoke, it's straight up 30% because you're always going to Tiger's Fury when you Convoke. So that's a lot higher values than Dragonflight. And same with Apex. Obviously you won't have Tiger's Fury up all the time, but it'll average out to about 25% bite damage. So definitely situations like with Funnel, like say you're doing Algathar's Academy, the tree boss, you have all those ads you can funnel with. Moonfire, it's going to give you some single target, but it's not going to give you the same value as spam Apex procs. And same with this. This probably leans a bit more AoE in general. And I guess also with Apex, even though Taste of Blood doesn't have an effect with it, you have the Sabertooth amp as well. So could definitely see Taste of Blood still being good with Wild Stalker. The last option is Resourceful Hunter, which I said in my last video was probably placeholder. Swipe from Dreamgrove told me that I'm coping, which might be true. And since then, I've kind of thought about this, and maybe this is supposed to be like their replacement for Protective Growth, like a defensive option. Like for Mythic Plus, you have this flat % versatility, which doesn't DR, diminishing return, like stats do. Like if it was 350 verse or whatever, that could DR with your verse. Flat 2% can't, as far as I know. So if you go to this site, there's a mechanic that is going to one-shot you, but you almost live. Like you could potentially grab this. A few issues though. Firstly, like 2% verse is quite a big damage loss, I would say, compared to these other talents. Also, Leech, not that useful. Avoidance would be a lot more useful because right now 2% verse is 1% DR, so it doesn't really add a lot of survivability. But I guess a few things in its favor is versatility does increase vine damage, whereas a lot of other talents aren't going to affect your vine damage. And I guess Leech is kind of useful with the healing and stuff, but it's kind of weak. Like maybe 3%, probably even needs to be 4% verse. So onto the bottom section, and we'll start with Druid of the Claw just because it's a bit simpler. So Apex almost for sure because we have Taste for Blood. That's going to influence that. Also, it seems to work with the Ravage, and also we're going to be lacking energy, so definitely going to need Apex for that. This choice, same as always, can't see too much changing. Small DPS loss, but simpler. Middle choice, who knows? So Incarn obviously has synergy with this. I've talked about it before, but at the same time, Convoke, it can proc and consume massive attack, and you're always going to Convoke inside of your Berserk. So could go either way. Convoke is obviously very bite heavy, and with this, as I talked about, always going to have Tiger's Fury up for Convoke. So 30% more bite damage in your CDs, going to be really good for Convoke. That might just sort of dip the scale. Could even be more AoE, more single target if it's tuned right. I guess there's no rampant ferocity now, so Convoke can't really AoE better or can't give any burst AoE. However, Incarn is just flat 10% damage Berserk now, rather than the 50% Shred, 50% Rake. So it no longer has an advantage with all these Rake talents. And if anything, maybe Convoke has the advantage now, just because in AoE, you spread your Convokes, you get double the value from Double Claw Rake, your free Rakes. So could go either way. Moving on, like this node, the Incarn node, it's still bad, but they might tune it, they might change it. It's always there as a possible option. I can't see 1 minute Convoke being good with this tree. It does have synergies with Wild Stalker. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But can't really see Swarm being too good because all the damage is in Ravage, like the bleed doesn't do much. And we do have Rake talents, definitely. Like if you really need single target, maybe that's an option, but you have to be a really single target heavy dungeon, I think. Maybe 2 points in Swarm though, because double primal wrath damage. Swarm amplifies that, the initial hit. That's always a potential option, but again, this bleed is so unbelievably weak. We'll have to see. Feral Frenzy, same choice as always, more single target, more AoE. CI is good with, especially Convoke. Feral Frenzy has this node here, 5 seconds. I don't think you need this node to play Feral Frenzy, but if you're not playing Merciless Claws and you're playing Feral Frenzy, you probably take that. So a little bit of choice in the hero tree as well. But yeah, that's kind of it for Druid of the Claw. Otherwise, there is also kind of left-right alternative where you go like this. The only issue with this is because Apex consumes Ravage, it's not going to benefit, your Ravage isn't going to benefit from this every time you consume with Apex. But maybe, you can try and weave them, weave bites with combo points. If that's the case, maybe Vein Ripper, maybe even up here, you take Tireless Energy instead of Double Claw Rake for, kind of like an old RF style build. Really hard to see this happening, but I think there's definitely a possibility because this is a lot of extra bite damage. It really kind of depends what happens with kind of Apex and Ravage. And as far as I know, you can consume Ravage with Apex. But if it's a really single target heavy dungeon, maybe, but option is always there. So back to Wildstalker and its bottom section, there's a lot of choice here. It's kind of going to depend on what we play up here. So as I talked about in the last video, Convoke and Lunar Inspiration, you don't play them together because Convoke casts it. So that kind of narrows down our choice if we're doing a Convoke Wildstalker build. Also, this doesn't have a lot of synergy with Convoke. So again, narrows it down. We probably play Taste for Blood with Convoke. And as I've talked about, this is 30% amp, bite amp, and you're always going to have Convoke up for this. So really good with Convoke. If you're playing Taste for Blood, you're obviously playing Apex, a lot of damage there. So it's kind of a funnily single targeting build. The thing with Convoke is it's not just all bite damage. It has some unique synergy with Wildstalker. So firstly, cast Moonfires, and in AoE can spread, Lunar Inspiration Moonfires on 2 or 3 targets, kind of depends what you roll. And with this tree, you're doing more Moonfire damage, plus Moonfire's been buffed anyway, and you might even be playing talents to amp Moonfire, like Swarm or whatever. So a bit of synergy there. Also, Convoke has a chance to cast Feral Frenzy, deck of 5, 2 minutes, so 1 and 5, deck of 2 here, 1 and 2. With this implant node, your Feral Frenzy casts a Bloodseeker Vine on the target, and the capstone, each Bloodseeker Vine, this does stack by the way, 10% stacking up, amp to the target. So you could Feral Frenzy into Convoke. If you're Convoke, cast a Feral Frenzy, that's 2 vines right there, like 20% damage. Quite a lot of potential for bursts, nice synergy with this node. If you're playing this node, you might even go 1-point Swarm just to sort of really amp those Feral Frenzies. But otherwise, with the Convoke variant, you can go CI. And the thing about CI is, in Dragonflight, its niche is kind of a little bit more AoE focused, but also a little bit burst focused, but it's kind of an all-rounder. But in the War Within, it's going to change a little bit because we no longer have Predator, so less uptime in AoE. So it's going to lose a little bit of AoE value, but it's going to gain a lot more burst value because you have full targets for your uptime for your Berserk and your Convoke. So getting full value from this in your CDs, whereas you're not getting the same value in AoE, but it's still obviously going to be good in AoE. But things like Convoke, it's going to synergize with CI quite a bit. So next up, we'll do the Lunar Inspiration version, and it's possible you can skip Apex here because your bite is doing a lot less damage now, but LI has some synergies, right? So firstly, it's another builder. Its low energy cost is hasted. It's really good for Blood Talons, and Apex eats through Blood Talons, right? So you will have more bite damage just through having, higher kind of BT usage with your Apex bites. Obviously it won't be as significant as this, but it's something. Also, Sabertooth change. So this amplifies LI now. So you're getting more bites through this. That's buffing your Moonfire, so there's synergy there. So definitely, it might not be as good as Taste of Blood, but I think there's enough synergy there that you'll still probably play Apex. But there is always the possibility we can drop it. Anyway, same kind of thing. You don't play Convoke with LI, so that kind of narrows it down a little bit. So we could play Incarn, same kind of thing here. You can go 1 point here, especially if you go Implant. You could go 2 points here. You could do 1-on-1, more single target. You can do Beekeeping, which I'm really excited about. I think in the current Dragonflight tree, there's not that many options for dots, whereas they've kind of added some nuance here, or rather they've kind of tuned the tree better for like Mythic Plus dot builds. So I think playing Unbridled could be really exciting. With this, you could play Feral Frenzy, you could play Incarn, you could even play CI, and maybe even drop Apex. A lot of choice there. I think that'll be really fun. So Savage Fury, the last Wildstalker variant, pretty interesting this one. So Apex, not as much synergy as with Lunar Inspiration and Taste of Blood, I'd say, but a little bit of synergy, more haste, more procs, but pretty minor. As I talked about, Convoke, not a lot of synergy there, maybe more of an Incarn angle, but could still be a Convoke, right? So we'll go with this for now. Feral Frenzy, definitely synergy there. So use your Tiger's Fury, your Feral Frenzy, and that haste is going to buff your Feral Frenzy. And every second one's going to line up, right? Every second Feral Frenzy. So first, third, fifth, etc. And if you want to go full burst, you go Swarm. So you go Tiger's Fury with Savage Fury into Swarm, into Feral Frenzy, chuck an Implant in there for the Vine damage. So a lot of potential there. Really cool how there's kind of like bursty dot options and ways to build around that. But I guess also, yeah, Unbridled, definitely possibility. So this is going to amp all your dots. Haste is obviously good for dots. Haste is going to buff Swarm damage itself. So that's an option. And I mean, again, always a possibility you drop Apex, especially with this one, which I think would be cool. I think dropping Apex is fine. Also, CI is obviously the big synergy, right? Target security damage, target security damage. I don't think this will necessarily be locked, but definitely the most obvious contender for your 2 points here. But again, if you want single target, you still kind of go Feral Frenzy or Swarm or both, or maybe even drop that, who knows. That's really bursty actually. So that's kind of cool, like stronger target security, Haste, Swarm, Feral Frenzy, maybe you can drop that, go all in. So yeah, pretty cool. Oh yeah, and on that note of kind of Haste buffing binds, so does kind of everything target security, right? So this kind of build would be really going in all in on this tree. You know, you take this Vine duplicate node, bursting growth, this does a lot of damage. Again, it's amplified by target fury. You know, more haste, more vines, more bursting growth. So even in kind, like the 10% damage amp to everything, you know, it gives you a longer berserk, so that's more vine amp. So if you want to go like a full vine kind of synergy with a tree build, I think this is probably the way. Obviously the verse is an option as well, but not looking as good right now. This node I didn't talk about in the last video. I can't really see it being competitive at the moment, but they could tune it to be, and I think that would be really interesting. Not just an extra choice, but the fact that you have a 20-second longer target fury versus a 15-second burstier, you're going to really feel that. Even if this effect was entirely passive, which it's not, it's actually quite a nice effect. Has some issues, but I won't get into that now. The 20-second versus 15-second, that's going to feel different. That's what you want from a talent, right? And it kind of covers what this one used to do, which gives you kind of dynamic target fury duration. It's never quite the same. Obviously there were issues with this, the uptime was too high, but I like that aspect where it's not just cookie cutter, you know, same duration, target fury, same kind of sequence or whatever. So just wrapping up with some final thoughts, opinions I've heard to the end and stuff. First, if you are a Blizzard employee watching this, please, I'm going to have an aneurysm. I see all these other YouTubers making alpha content. Anyway, top section, worse than before. Not as bad as Druid Claw, worse than Dragonflight. Middle section as Wildstalker is probably about equally interesting, maybe even slightly better than Dragonflight, just because of these kind of new dot options, and you know, you only have 1 point to spend, but it is a pretty meaningful point, and it does influence down here. There's some influences in here as well. Yeah, bottom section, absolute banger for Wildstalker. Issue is, you know, still a lot of mandatory talents, which isn't the end of the world, because, you know, at least there's one good choice. But this node, I absolutely hate this node. I've talked about it in another video. It's a shit node, but it kind of forces you into these rake nodes as Wildstalker, which seems a bit overkill because you probably want to take rake stuff anyway as Wildstalker. Kind of like this talent here, I've talked about this in the Druid Claw video. It's stupid, like why is it increasing bite more when this is a stronger bite? It's already got synergy with all the bite talents. It's just overkill. You just can't select other things. And yeah, it's kind of, you know, shown here with how shit the middle section of Druid Claw is. There's literally no choice at all that I can see. Like really, I can't even see this, to be honest. But possibly. You know, bottom section, less choice than Wildstalker as well. I think partly because the middle section is so locked as well, but it doesn't matter too much because this tree is kind of more interesting anyway, so at least it has that going for it. With these hero trees, there's some pretty cool little choices like Implant, nice little synergies, but even, you know, these other choices, yeah, I quite like them. Kind of adds to the tree. Hopefully this bear weaving is cool. But otherwise, yeah, I guess no RF, still disappointed about that. I kind of wish they reworked it a little bit. But you know, I don't have alpha. I don't know if we'd even have the energy for it. But you know, when they add nodes like this, anyway, I'm kind of repeating myself from other videos. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for all the likes, the comments. Yeah, keep doing that stuff, and I'll keep doing these videos. I'll probably do a little season 4 gameplay video this weekend if I have time. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Hopefully see you in alpha.